Welcome to Seniors Alive. This program features interviews with people who work with seniors and also people who are seniors themselves living a very full, high-quality life here in Nevada County. And today I have two guests, Karen Chaleski and Chris Holland, both of whom fit both categories. And I think that you will agree that what they have been working on is a very important project for Nevada County in terms of the housing needs that we have. This particular program will be the last in kind of a series we've been having on various aspects of housing needs and ways people in our community are answering them. So the answer that we have for the housing needs is a very kind of focused approach, and it's called SHARE, which gives you a little hint as to what we're working on. So Chris, tell me how SHARE got started and what it stands for.
Well, first of all, let's wind the clock back a couple of years, and you and I are both members of an organization in this community called ECPC. It's called Elder Care Providers Coalition, and it's an informal network that meets every month and discusses issues relevant to seniors in the community, and it has all kinds of members who work with seniors, agencies, for-profits, non-profits. And there was a feeling at the time that we were heading towards a crisis in Nevada County for low-income seniors in terms of housing that people on low incomes could afford. And Jeree Waller, who is the Deputy Legal Guardian for the county and in charge of Adult Protective Services, put together a subcommittee. And you and I were both members who felt passionately enough about this issue, along with several other people, to form a committee to look at what we could do for seniors that were resource challenged in this part of the county. So originally we started to talk about the fact that there had been census information put out by Area 4 Council on Aging, and it was specific for over 65s in Nevada County. And it was a beautiful little matrix, and it showed financial assets in one direction and physical ability in the other. Mm-hmm. Well, looking at the numbers, about 20% or 1 in 5 in Nevada County falls in the low-income bracket. And that is all the way from moderate risk because they have fairly good physical ability to high risk, which means they need a lot of assistance with daily living. Well, when we did the numbers, it looked like there were 3,400 low-income people in Nevada County, over 65. Mm-hmm. And we said that's a huge amount. Who would have
a hard time finding a place to live here.
Right, or just finding it difficult to make ends meet. Mm-hmm. And so our initial thoughts, we brainstormed a lot, and we were trying to look at people that need a lot of help as well as people that can live somewhat independently. And we ended up saying, you know, to provide the maximum amount of care is going to take a long time. It's going to involve developers, builders. There's a crisis right now. And so our committee split into two projects. One of them, headed up by Teresa Helene, was just to simply approach assisted livings and care facilities in the county and open up more SSI beds. And that was for people who need more help with daily activities. And she was successful in getting a couple more SSI beds.
We could always use more, couldn't we?
Right. We are desperately short of housing for low-income seniors in this area, period. But the other project, which was the bigger one and the one that we're talking about today, actually came about as an idea suggested by Terry Boyer from Interim Home Services. And he was talking about the fact that in his work, providing caregivers to people in their own homes, he was seeing a lot of seniors who are in big homes on their own, maybe isolated, maybe struggling to pay utility bills. And he said, what a shame that they have these big homes and they're isolated and they need a little help. And there are people who are at risk of becoming homeless. And from that, the idea was born that maybe there was a way to match seniors in need with seniors that would welcome somebody to share their home. And we realized too that there's a lot of fear on both sides, because whenever you have somebody sharing your home, both sides can be vulnerable. And so we spent a lot of time researching how we could do this match, how we could in some ways help safeguard seniors on both sides. And we ran into a huge problem, and it's called legal stuff. It's called discrimination, because under state housing law, which is tougher than federal housing law, you may not advertise housing specifically for seniors unless it falls in a government category of senior housing, which is apartments or senior mobile home parks. And what we were talking about isn't classified as senior housing.
So what did we do?
After the initial panic and name calling, because we couldn't understand why such a good solution to the problem couldn't be implemented, I had been talking to, as she was then, Captain Martha Shepherd at the Salvation Army. She's now Major Martha, and said, look, we need to do something about homelessness in the area. And the Salvation Army had already just got a grant to help prevent homelessness amongst all ages. So the initial idea was that we would put together a database and have private ads added into that database, along with information from newspaper ads and from Craigslist and online sources, and then see if we could sort through any that might be suitable for seniors. And we weren't quite sure how to do this without being discriminatory.
And these were ads, let me just interrupt, these were ads for rooms for rent, apartments,
granny units, anything that was under $600 a month. We defined that as being within reach. I mean, that may be unrealistic for some really resource-challenged people, but that was our cutoff. And that started to roll, and that is, part of what is happening right now. But the absolute inspiration, and I think it was divine inspiration, was when Martha said, how about CCM? And I said, what's CCM? And she said, Community Care Ministry. So now the whole idea of the program is there is an all-age, affordable housing program that the Salvation Army operates at their headquarters on Alta Street in Grass Valley. If anyone is deemed to be more vulnerable by virtue of age and frailty, or by physical disability, or even by mental challenge, there is the option to move them across into community care ministry and have a lot of very close attention, possibly even background checks, which the Salvation Army can authorize background checking. So that was a beautiful solution that allowed us to move forward, and from the point of view of the Elder Care Providers Coalition, have something to try and help seniors, but also from the Salvation Army point of view to have something that applies to any ages. And so this is a community-wide program for low-cost housing, but there's a specific interest and awareness for seniors.
On the part of our ECPC committee, our Elder Care Providers Coalition committee. So there we were with a partner. I mean, it took a while, I remember, for this to really gel, but we had finally partnered with Salvation Army. And I remember thinking we needed to gather the data, what was available in the community, and so we asked RSVP, which is Retired Senior Volunteers Program, for a volunteer to help us collect data. And that was when Karen came into the picture. Yay, Karen. And so, yes, so you knew you were going to be volunteering for our committee, and you came to one of the meetings that we had, the subcommittee meeting. And then somehow at that meeting, or a meeting, maybe the second one, we talked about the need to interview both the people who are going to be sharing the homes and the people looking for a place to live.
And by this time, too, we were very focused on the whole idea of opening up spaces in people's homes as opposed to the apartment units that, are professionally managed.
For many years I've seen, we have so many big houses in this community. We're very unique here. And there's so many houses that are just huge, and one person or maybe two people live there all alone, taking up this much space in a whole lot more space. And I've always thought it's just a shame that all that space is going to waste, and so many people need somebody around to make sure they wake up every morning, to make sure that they don't need something that someone else can provide. And I had a good example. A friend of mine who lives alone way, way, way out of town had to have a procedure at the hospital. So I drove out there and took her to that. But if somebody lived there with her, it would have been so much more comfortable for her to have that happen instead of having to have someone come out from outside. And that was just a little example. Another example is that my husband and I have someone that lives in our house and has lived there for a very long time, and all of our lives have been really helped because of that association.
You're freer to go away on trips,
Right.
knowing someone's in the house.
Right. Or if there's any problem, one of us can do something, another one can't, and it's very, very, very positive. And I see so many people when I'm delivering Meals on Wheels that live alone in big homes. Their lives would be so much better if someone else were on that property. Sure, you might give up a little bit of privacy, but probably not a lot. When people come into living situations like that, generally they really have a lot more respect for each other's privacy, much more than family does.
Isn't that something that you look for and screen for when you're interviewing, how much somebody wants contact
Right.
and how much they want their privacy?
Yeah.
And so you try to match up people that have similar kind of needs.
Yeah, so that's been some of the things that and I watch the Golden Girls. I still watch the Golden Girls on TV, and I see what
Yeah,
fun they have.
they're home
and
sharing.
yes, it's not perfect, and yes, they have some issues between them, but they solve them.
Yeah.
And they move on, and they still live in a quote family unit unquote and
Well,
shared housing.
I didn't even think about this when we were, talking about doing the show, but as you know, I'm working in Roseville now as a hospice chaplain half-time, and I am sharing the homes of 3 different families. We alternate me. Nobody can stand me every week.
They want to share you because they all want you.
But it is so much fun. 3 weeks is long enough for news to happen, and so I'm with them. Like I'll be staying with these friends in Roseville this week, and next week I'll be staying with friends in Rockland for 2 nights. Every family is 2 nights, and so we have a chance to get caught up on the news and care about what's happening with each other. And a lot of times I just have a dinner out and then come home and just chat with them and then go to my room. So there's lots of privacy for me and the family I'm renting from. Well, so let's talk about the actual logistics of what happens when someone, let's start out with somebody wanting a place to rent.
Whether they want a place to rent or they have a place they want to rent out, they can call the Salvation Army, 274-3500, and tell them that what their needs are, and we can set up an interview at that time. Set up and see who might fit some of the parameters. And when I have gotten down to talking to people and saying this person might fit in your situation and exchanging phone numbers, and then they take it from there, I suggest that they go and spend a couple of nights before they make that final decision.
Good idea.
Yeah, I will add here that we were helped a lot in setting up this program by getting hold of a brochure, or not a brochure, it was a booklet from the National Shared Housing Coalition, and it had a lot of very good and very detailed questions on how to match people, because you don't want to match up a smoker and a non-smoker, and you don't want to match up somebody that lives an aerosol-free life with somebody that uses hairspray every
And the
day.
pets thing too.
Yes,
There are
pets
so many
and
considerations.
And also things like mobility issues. Is there a ramp into the house? You know, do they need a ramp, or are they fine with steps? And so things like that. So you have a pretty detailed intake questionnaire, don't you? That you refer
Do they
to.
look through a book of possible places? I've seen that book, but do you do all the matching in your head rather than looking through the book?
So far, I've done quite a bit of that. There is a book there for people, but generally it's people who are not seniors who are looking through that book.
I see.
Is what I've observed. Sometimes seniors are a little more reticent to do something like that. They would rather have somebody that you've talked to and met one-to-one.
Yeah.
And sometimes we go out and screen the properties just to make sure that's okay and that it's a safe situation for people.
You were perfect for that
Yes.
job, and I mean it's a volunteer job, and God bless you, Karen, because
You also have property
management experience.
I've done it.
too, so-
I've done it
yeah,
a lot of years.
what a natural fit. So, what would be the requirements for a person that wants to participate in this program?
We want them to be senior. That depends on how much the person, both people on both sides want to exchange, how much money they want to exchange, how much rent they want to charge, how much rent they're able to pay. So that is a real bottom line parameter there. And sometimes those don't quite match up. It's harder and harder for people to pay rents. It's harder and harder for people to pay the utilities and the property taxes. So trying to make this match is really going to help a lot.
There is a little flexibility, though, isn't
Of
there,
course,
in terms
they're
of
people. They're all
exchanging?
people.
If somebody wants to exchange services, so again, that's something that the prospective homeowner and the prospective sharer can discuss between them. And some homeowners may say, no, you know, I absolutely need so much per month, but others may say, oh, it would be nice to have somebody cook a meal for me, you know,
Run
or
groceries.
whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So that's
And it doesn't have to
flexible.
be a lifelong decision. People need to be aware of that. It doesn't have to be a lifelong marriage, so to speak. So,
It's a month-to-month agreement, is it?
yes, and people can do their own agreements.
Uh-huh.
They can do that, and we definitely suggest there is something in writing. And as you mentioned, people can do background checks, and the Salvation Army will assist them in that process as well.
There's even a way to put in volunteer hours in order to
Correct.
pay for the background check,
Yes.
because as with everything government, the fees are going up and up. So background checking is not a small amount, but there is a way to put in hours volunteering with the Salvation Army to cover that, if that is something that both sides feel is an appropriate thing to do.
About how many volunteer hours would someone need to put in? For
It depends on the situation. Every situation is going to be completely unique. There might be somebody who has tremendous needs, and there might be somebody who has no needs. It just depends on different people.
Well, this is the thing I think that's so beautiful about the program at this point. It is so personalized.
Very flexible.
Yeah.
It's very flexible.
Therefore, yes.
And even the definition of senior is very flexible as
Exactly.
well, because there is no age cutoff.
I do want to add one thing that's been very interesting. Working with the Salvation Army and interviewing these different people, I have a list on the side of those who have wanted to be the person who shares the house and one who has the house to share. I thought that was going to be very out of balance, and it's almost equal.
Wow.
So that's been extremely interesting.
That is wonderful. And how do you get the word out?
Just one-to-one. Strictly
One-to-one.
one-to-one. I've gone to a couple of meetings, and of course today. And it doesn't have to be just you or you. It could be someone you know that has a need.
This is pretty uncharted territory, especially for us in Western Nevada County, and so we did not want to do a huge amount of publicity and say, "Ta-da, we've got this program," and splash it across, you know, the Union front page. What we said was, let's start with referrals, particularly as the Salvation Army already works with people at risk of being homeless and provides assistance with low-cost housing.
Yeah.
And then gradually put the word out with programs like this. And Karen, you will be talking to various church officials.
do
Might
that.
you? Yeah.
I think
And anybody
that's
could reach me
fine.
through the Salvation Army. That would be fine.
Okay, I think that's a wonderful way to get the word out. But as you say, it's grown in a very organic way, just one small step at a time, so that nothing has gotten out of balance so far. And that's great that we have as many people interested in renting a room.
It is.
As wanting to rent.
It is.
Now, I remember we went through the whole matter of renting to one person is great, but don't think you can start a whole rooming house, because there are
That's different.
The
much
legal
more
differences,
complicated
yeah,
rules.
yeah. And in terms of landlord protections, which isn't something that you hear talked about a lot, it is much quicker for when there isn't a good match for a landlord to basically say goodbye to the person that is occupying their home if it is called a lodger, which is one person in somebody's primary residence. And if it's considered a rental, which is 2 or more people, or not the homeowner's primary residence, then there are many more protections for the renter. And so that's something, again, to reassure seniors that are thinking about doing this. It's important just to look at that one person within your own home. And there are much more safeguards then for the person taking that first step and saying, yes, I will open my home up, if it's the right person. And Karen is superb at matching.
And we should say that if anybody is at all interested in even exploring this as an idea for themselves, to give you a call and just to say, you know, I have this extra room and I could really use a little company, and just call and sort of talk through what it would be like, what it would entail. You don't have to sign on the dotted line the minute you decide to make a phone call.
I was at Lake Wildwood recently doing the presentation, and one lady came up to me afterwards and she said, you know, my mother-in-law is having real trouble making the, I forget if it was payments or rent, and a really nice house in a very nice subdivision here, and she said this might be perfect for her. And as another lady came up 5 minutes later and she said, I think this is something I'd like to do. And she's one of the people who delivers meals.
Yeah.
So if people hear it enough, it could be just great. I just think it's an idea whose time is here, and with our economy the way it is, this could be a great way for changes to be made.
And actually, because of the economy nationwide, this idea that kind of came about in Nevada County for us, you know, obviously it came about here. There was the other project, I think, in Burlingame that home sharing manual came out of. But it's the kind of thing that really could mushroom nationwide because of the economy. Whereas we thought, well, we have so many seniors here in Nevada County and housing costs are high. So we have a few minutes left, and there is still this concern that we started out with, isn't there, Chris? Why don't you express this area that still we're not able to address?
Right. Well, because of my own personal experience, I am very concerned still about seniors that need to be in assisted living, because that is so expensive. And I had walked with my husband through an 8-year journey of Alzheimer's, and the last year I could not do it myself. And I was shocked at the cost of care. Most people have said, oh, $2,500 to $3,000 a month. Well, believe me, if you have somebody that is active 24/7, it is way more than that. I ended up paying over $10,000 a month for his care, which even at $2,500 to $3,000, even if you could find somewhere at that price, families can't do that and still pay their own living expenses. So I've had to be in my bonnet for a long time about how do you tackle a situation like that. We have so few beds available in this area that when somebody needs placement and they can't afford a lot of money, they get sent out of county, quite often to Sacramento. So
We
I'm
did have
hoping-
Teresa Haleen on this program once about that
problem. Well, I'm so glad that Teresa is still part of our committee, and we are now talking about refocusing the committee to what we can do for people who need more assistance. And I know, Judith, you're very passionate about the concierge, the village concept, where people pay an annual membership and then get volunteers or discounted contractors to help with things. I'm still feeling there's a critical need in this county for the people who need the most care.
And I feel I really want to kind of just go easy on my passion for a year or two while we solve this more
another
urgent.
show.
Yeah, it is. It is another show.
To me, part of what finally worked for me in my husband's last few months was to combine the cost of my living with the cost of his living, and I moved a caregiver family into the house. And so I would like to see something where there can be separate units, separate apartments or cottages or whatever, and a small central assisted living facility, and people can trade off then their time to chop food for dinner or to maintain the landscape or to answer phones in return for having full care for their loved one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it is hopefully an idea whose time has also come, and this committee has now had over 2 years, almost 3 years, I think, of experience of working together, and I think that we will find a way to make a little progress. We have come almost to the end of our time. It just tends to scoot by. I want to thank you both so much, Chris and Karen, for coming and sharing the history and the whole process and what's happening now. We also would really like to thank the Salvation Army for their wonderful support of this SHARE program. And again, if you are interested at all in finding out how to rent your home, not your home, a room in your home, or to rent a room in a home, and if you're a senior, very loosely defined, as we said, please do call the Salvation Army at 530-274-3500. I want to thank the crew so much for the show today. Sam and Adele, Diane and Gail and Paul out there, I think, and Terry. So we've got all sorts of folks out there. Thank you.